What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. Is Luke Fickell a top 10 college football coach in the country? We're going to talk about a list that has him right in that area. Is that a little too much hype? Let's talk about it and more on today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Really do appreciate everybody tuning into this, helping us build this community. Y'all are amazing. And let's get into it. So Pro Football Focus released their list of the top 25 coaches in college football right now. Okay. And a couple of things stuck out to me that I want to talk about. And again, we like to get right into it on this show. Not a lot of fluff, not a lot of filler. So a couple things stuck out to me right away. The first, we talked about this last year on the show. For those of you who are with us, I did a Big Ten coach ranking. We're going to do that again this year. We're going to make it collaborative. I think we're going to get the Locked On Gophers guy. We're going to get maybe the Locked On Spartans guy. We're going to have like a collaborative Big Ten coaches ranking show. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But when I did my coach rankings last year, one of the things that I talked about and that really stuck out to me was that, and this is last year, this is before Matt Rule came on board. This is before Luke Fickell came on board. The Big Ten in the last several years has really upgraded their coaching, right? It's a very strong conference in terms of head coaches right now, which is great, right? A rising tide lifts all boats. I think a better Big Ten is better for Wisconsin. I've talked about that before. And you look at the coaches now, there are some legit coaches up and down the Big Ten. It's really exciting to see that. So anyway, let's get into Pro Football Focus's top 25 college football coaches. Luke Fickell, number 9 on this list. Top 10. Does that feel a little high? Maybe. But keep in mind, Luke Fickell is one of 16 coaches, okay, to get to a college football playoff semifinal. 16. And several of those guys are no longer coaching, right? If you look at the active coaches, it's 10, 11, 12 that have done in the country that have done what Luke Fickell did. Now, you can look at this from two avenues. I have seen it argued both ways. Some people are going to say, look at what he did at Cincinnati. Now imagine what he's going to do at a place like Wisconsin, right? Because if he can do that at Cincinnati, the sky's the limit in the Big Ten with Big Ten resources, with Wisconsin, a winning program. He's going to be incredible. I've also seen people argue what he did in Cincinnati is actually not as impressive because he wasn't going through the rigors of a Big Ten schedule, right? He wasn't going through the meat grinder of an SEC schedule. So, listen, I think as it often is, the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? Luke Fickell is without doubt going to have more resources. He's going to have access to recruit better players. He's going to have a lot more money and resources and investment for the NIL era of college football at Wisconsin. He's also going to have to go to Iowa one year and play at Ohio State and Michigan State and USC is coming in and UCLA and yes, the competition is also getting ratcheted up for him. But I think the exciting thing for Badger fans is whether I think it's a little meaningless in the bigger picture to say, is he the 9th coach? Is that a little overrated? Is he a little underrated? Is he actually more like 14th? The bigger point here, Badger fans, is he's one of the best coaches in college football, nationally recognized as that. And that brand appeal increases your excitement base with the program. It's going to lead to better recruiting. We've already seen that. It's going to allow them to attract better staff members. We've already seen that. What did Phil Longo talk about? Phil Longo talked about, if I ever have a chance to coach with Luke Fickell again, I'm going to take that chance, right? That's why Phil Longo's in Madison. It's not because of the winters, right? It's not because of the weather. It's because of this man. It's because of Luke Fickell. And if you use that as a metric, the ability to attract and build a staff of people that want to work for you, yeah, like he's probably is about a top 10-ish coach. And again, even if he's 11th, 12th, if you want to say, well, I'd have him more like 15, that's still one of the elite coaches in the country because there's more than 15 really good college football brands in the country, right? There's like 8 of them in the SEC. There's like 5 or 6 of them in the Big Ten themselves. And then you think about Clemson, Miami, Florida State, UCLA, Washington, Oregon. If you have a top 15 coach, your program is in a great spot. And I think even if you think this list is a little high, he's quite clearly a top 15-ish coach right now, maybe top 10-ish. I think 10 is right about where I would have him when you look at the people ahead of him. They have Sonny Dykes behind him at TCU. I would probably have Sonny Dykes a little ahead of Luke Fickell just because of what Sonny Dykes was able to do last year. It was incredible what he did at TCU. But again, we're splitting hairs there. Wisconsin has an elite coach. We already know that, but it's awesome to see the national perspective of Wisconsin with Luke Fickell, how excited people are, and the validation that, yes, it's not just a homer thing. It's not just Wisconsin people looking through rose-colored glasses and saying, I think we have a top 10 coach. No, it's from a national perspective. People who follow this for a living, who write about this for a living. That's one of the best coaches in college football. Congratulations, Madison. You have them. Let's take a really quick look at this top kind of 25 list and where some of the other Big Ten coaches are on it. Notably absent, that dude from Minnesota, not on this list. Not shocking to me, but not on the list. So they have Jim Harbaugh at number 3, Ryan Day at 7, Franklin at 10, Matt Rule at 25. And then listen, if you think about USC and UCLA coming in, they have Chip Kelly on the list and Lincoln Riley's number 5. So when USC gets here, bringing Lincoln Riley with him, you're talking about 5 of the top 10 coaches on this list are Big Ten guys, right? Again, I talked about that influx of coaching talent. Harbaugh, Day, Lincoln Riley. Why do I keep messing his name up? Lincoln Riley, Luke Fickell, James Franklin. And that's not even to mention the guys like Kirk Ferentz, Mel Tucker, Greg Schiano. It's just a really, really good group of coaches in the Big Ten right now. But again, as a Wisconsin fan, the takeaway is, yeah, from a national perspective, one of the best coaches in college football resides in Madison. And I think that's warranted. There is a very small number of coaches that have been to a college football playoff. Now that number is about to explode as the playoff, expands. But up to this point, that's a very select group of company. And if you remember that game between Cincinnati and Alabama, Cincinnati was not bulldozed in that game. Alabama was clearly more talented. They made a point, we're just going to run the ball because we have bigger, more physical players to some degree because we're Alabama. But Cincy wasn't outclassed in that game. We've seen Alabama in big games. We've seen some playoff games that are just 45-0. I mean, everyone remembers Michigan State getting to the playoffs and then just getting absolutely waxed. Cincinnati held their own. I think that's important to understand because the argument that he just kind of backdoored his way into the playoffs because he didn't play anybody, that team did play some teams. And then when they got to the playoffs, they held their own against Alabama for the most part. So I think the rating's warranted. I'm excited about it. Luke Fickell, a top 10 coach. Let me know your thoughts if that feels right to you. Coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about in-state recruiting, some interesting thoughts when you look back at the last several classes, right? Are players leaving the state of Wisconsin, is recruiting inside the state of Wisconsin going to become less and less important? We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And it's a great time to join up with the no sweat first bet up to $1,000 back. Baseball's in swing, grand slams, double plays, strikeouts. It is the perfect time to get into FanDuel. Get no sweat first bet up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. Plus, the NBA playoffs are going on. We've already seen it started. It's a great time if you have a good feel on. We talked about the Kings saying, hey, don't think Golden State's going to roll over them. Kings are going to win game 1. That was right on the money. That's going to be a tough matchup. If you believe in the Kings, you can still get really good odds on them, have home court through this round at least. So it's a great time with baseball and basketball full in swing. Get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 back. Same game parlays make it more exciting in America's easiest app to use. Safe, secure, super simple to download. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, let's keep going here. I want to talk about in-state recruiting a little bit. And we touched on this in a couple previous shows, but it looks, I wanted to take a deeper dive because everybody who has followed Wisconsin football for basically Barry Alvarez on, right? Basically the start of the Alvarez era, it was about building the wall around the state. Every single recruiting offseason literally started with, we have to build the wall around the state. And when Wisconsin lost a player they were really after, when Wisconsin lost a #1 player in the state, it was pretty seismic news. Like, it just didn't happen often. Now, Wisconsin lost recruiting battles here and there, but oftentimes it was with a player that maybe they weren't really after. Maybe it wasn't that big of a loss. They would lock down 6 of the top 7 players in state, 5 of the top 5, every year getting the top 2 or 3 that they wanted. And the last few years, that's really started to shift. right? So this year you have Donovan Harbour and you have Corey Smith, the two teammates at a Catholic Memorial, the number 1 and the number 3 player in the state. If you look at the 247 composite, both 4-star players, both in previous years would have been the biggest targets of the cycle, essentially, right? An in-state 4-star running back with offers from everywhere and a mauler of a guard. You can't let those players leave the state. That would have been the mantra. And it feels like both of them are leaving, right? Now, all the winds have pointed that direction. We've talked about it. I think there's an NIL component to this where other schools ponied up a lot more money potentially, just based on some things we're hearing. It's also possible that Wisconsin is going in a different direction. Maybe these players never wanted to come to Wisconsin, but it's interesting, right? It's worth talking about. And then you look back to last year, Wisconsin only signs one player from the state. Now, it wasn't a deep state, but I thought Evan Herman was a guy they could have gone after. They let him go to Vanderbilt. And you go to the previous year before that, Carson Hinsman left, Billy Schrouth left, Jerry Cross left, right? 3 of the top 6 players in that class left. So now you're looking at 3 straight classes where you've missed. I shouldn't say missed, but yeah, I'm going to say missed, because you did go after Hinsman and Schrouth and Jerry Cross and you didn't get them. And in this class, at least initially, you did go after Corey Smith and Donovan Harbour. And now all those players are leaving. What does that tell us about in-state recruiting in Wisconsin? The first thing I would say is recruiting as a whole, college football as a whole, the landscape is dramatically different in the NIL era. Okay, everything's different. I think players grow up typically with a little less inherent loyalty to the in-state school, right? National brands are a little bigger. It's easy to watch everything. I don't think the in-state kids are necessarily growing up as big of a Wisconsin fan as they used to be. And then I think there's just an NIL component where there are schools that are going to come in and they're just going to snipe prospects with NIL money. And you're not going to be able to match every deal for every player, even if you wanted to. Now, there's also an element where I think Luke Fickell, here's the other part that I think is interesting with Fickell and his staff. I think they're going, and they've talked about it, but I think it's taken us a few minutes to realize it and to kind of see it in effect, is they are going that 350 mile radius. We're going to recruit inside this 350 mile radius. And in doing so, that the in-state boundaries aren't quite as important. We're not going to be fanatical about, we need to lock down the state. We're going to get every prospect we want from in-state. It's going to be, we're really going to target this Midwestern circle. And if some players leave the state, that's fine, but we're going to hit Illinois exceptionally hard. We're going to hit Missouri. We're going to hit Minnesota. We're going to hit Ohio. We're going to hit Michigan. And we're going to hit those areas harder. So the Midwestern vibe is going to be relatively similar, but it's going to be more focused in Wisconsin and the states around it, and not hyper-focused inside Wisconsin. I think we're starting to see that with Luke Fickell, right? Darian Dupree, the electric, fast running back they're on from Illinois, right? That's the guy who could be getting the scholarship instead of Corey Smith. That's the guy that could be landing instead of Corey Smith. And at the end of the day, does that really matter, right? And that's kind of the question. If you're getting a 4-star electric running back from Illinois, doesn't matter that you lost kind of a 4-star electric running back from Wisconsin. It's a 1-for-1 swap in a lot of ways. So I think it's going to take a mindset for us, myself included. Like I'm kind of bummed about losing Corey Smith. I don't think you can make a habit of losing in-state 4-star running backs, but that just might be a remnant of the past, right? That might be me just thinking, because that's how it's always been at Wisconsin. And someone brought it up in the chat the other day. It's because in previous staffs, if you didn't land that 4-star running back in state, you weren't getting another one. Well, Luke Fickell might be changing that paradigm a little bit. And, not all change is bad, not all change is good. We definitely need to wait and see. But I think it's interesting to watch. And I think that Wisconsin, at all costs, we're going to lock down the state and close the border. I think those days might be kind of over. Not that they're not going to go after Wisconsin players. Derek Jensen's committed. Rob Booker's committed. They're going after Nathan Roy. Like, Wisconsin's still going to be a big part of the strategy. Landon Gauthier, for example. But it just might not be the be-all, end-all part of the strategy that it used to be under previous staffs. And I think we probably have to get used to losing 2 or 3 kids that here and there, high 3-star, low 4-star players, where in the past those were must-gets. Now it's become they're going to find that fit in the Midwest somewhere. So I think it's interesting. It's definitely different and unique for what we've seen in the last 20 years, but not everything's going to stay the same when you swap out the entire coaching staff and you bring in Luke Fickell, who has a way of doing things. So, a couple things that are interesting to me. Like I said, the emphasis on Illinois is going to be huge. We've seen it. A ton of players already coming in off visits from Illinois. They hit Illinois pretty hard last year. JT Taylor, Jancy, some of those guys. So Illinois going forward, Missouri, Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio, I think they're going to just be huge areas of focus. So interested to see it. We're going to pause there on this, take a quick break for our friends of the show, and then we're going to get back with a bunch of your comments, basketball and football, including are the quarterbacks trying to throw a few too many interceptions? What player we need to target in the portal and basketball. We're going to get into all your comments next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a very quick break for our friends of the show. All right, welcome back to Locked On Badgers. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. All the everydayers that are coming to listen every day. It's a new thing we're kind of talking about. It's just awesome. If you were with us yesterday, you were to heard us talk further about AJ Storr, the transfer coming in. If you're going to be with us later this week, we're going to get John Garcia Jr. on again, talk about some really interesting prospects coming to Madison. And we're going to be doing that live show on Friday. So really appreciate everybody tuning in, the everydayers, as we build this community. Y'all are the best. All right, let's get into some comments. So this is from Melvin. And again, I appreciate all the comments. I try to get to as many of them as I can. This is in response to AJ Storr committing. Melvin says, guard didn't close on this guy. The varsity collective threw some money at him. When you have guard, our teams have already hit its ceiling. So clearly Melvin, a guy that's out on the guard bandwagon, not riding that train. And that's fine. Like I've always said it, however you think is however you think. And I totally respect it. As long as we can be respectful and chop it up together, I'm all for different ideas and thoughts. So the one thing I would say, Melvin, is a lot of schools were throwing NIL money at this guy. So guard did play a role. And AJ Storr talked about it. Guard made him feel welcome. Guard made the effort. So I would respectfully disagree with this because it's not like Wisconsin was the only school throwing NIL money at AJ Storr. He had a laundry list of offers, and the type of schools that were offering him are the type of schools that have NIL money to burn. So appreciate the comment, but I would respectfully disagree on that one. Dice Gaming says, this team has the potential to be the best Badger basketball team since the 14-15 team. Let's go. Can be super deep if Winter, Blackwell, and Yalden play great as freshmen, need Hodges and Ilver to develop. So that's high praise for sure. I think it's too much to ask if you're asking for Winter, Blackwell, and Yalden to all play great as a freshman. I really love the potential of Winter. That's a guy Rajiv loves as well. I think Yalden's playing right away, and I think he's going to play well right away. I don't think there's going to be a huge learning curve for him. And I've talked about Blackwell. I think Blackwell's really underrated. Athletic guard, built well. Physically, he's ready to step in right away as a combo guard. He's going to offer defensive versatility. He's a good shooter, too. He can be a 3-and-D guy maybe right away. But to expect them all to play great, I think he's a little tough. And I just have no faith in Hodges developing at this point. And I don't even know if it's a Hodges thing. It might be a guard / Hodges thing, right? Like Hodges might just be a fit in a better system. But when you look at what we turned to last year for front court depth, the fact that Hodges couldn't get any burn is incredibly discouraging if you're on the Hodges hype train. I'll just say that. So I wouldn't expect Hodges to develop much, but it would be an amazing surprise if he did. Even having said all that, right, to loop it back to your original point, I do think this team is going to be really deep. Even if you don't get great play from Winter and Blackwell right away and Hodges and Ilver don't develop. We talked about it yesterday. I feel confident going about 9 deep right now, right? You have your starting 5 coming back, AJ Storr coming in, Noah Reynolds coming in, Gus coming in. That's 8. And you're telling me we just need one more guy to develop to be 9 deep? And that one guy could be Blackwell. It could be Winter. It could be Kamari. It could be Hodges. It could be Ilver. It could be Lindsey. It could be another transfer coming in, for gosh sake. So I think they're going to be 9 deep with quality, which is a lot different than we've been the last 2 years. So I think your point is dead on in terms of how deep this team is going to be. I just don't expect the rest of the peripheral pieces there, Winter, Blackwell, Hodges, and Ilver, to develop. But either way, Dice, man, I appreciate the comment. I agree. We're going to be really deep next year. Greg Lincecum says if Gus does play back at 5, he'd better bring his big boy game. I'd like to see at least 10 guys develop during non-conference in case of injury or matchup situations. Greg, man, you've been reading my mind or watching the show. The guard has to be a little more liberal non-conference. In games where you have a little more flexibility, let some players play. Especially, especially next year, right? Where you're going to have to tinker with your rotations. You're going to have to mess with your lineups a little bit to figure out what works. You're going to be meshing in AJ Storr, Noah Reynolds, and you're going to be meshing in a really talented group of freshmen. Plus, you have those other backups coming back. So I would hope and expect a liberal amount of experimentation next year in the non-conference. I think Greg Gard's going to need to do that. I don't think it's been one of his strengths. And I think it hurts him. I think it hurts the depth of the team. It hurts the development of the young players. So I'm excited to see it. If it happens, I'll be disappointed if it doesn't. I am worried that Greg Gard gets a little set in his ways. So we'll see next year. I appreciate the comment, Greg. I agree if Gard plays back or if Gus plays backup 5, he's going to have to bring his big boy game. But that's kind of who he is, right? That's the thing. He already is a big dude. He's a 6'9", 240-pound kid, young man, however you want to name it. So I think he's going to be ready to play that big boy game right away. And the other thing I just point out, I've talked about this before, but I think this gets lost at times. A lot of the big centers are kind of tall and scrawny, right? There's not a ton of just monsters out there. And if you're tall and scrawny, let's say you're 6'11", 215, Gus is going to push that dude around. So it's not all about height, right? There is a component to just strength, footwork, positioning, and IQ. And I think Gus checks a lot of those boxes. So I think he can be a backup 5 next year. I'm really not that worried about it. Not nearly as much as other people. Greg Gullickscrud. We're, again, looking for a name for Justin, kind of an intro. We got one for Rajiv. He says, Justin with Justin. I love the play on the name. I love the play of the name. I'm just not sure if it encapsulates who Justin is. It's a tough ask. Like Rajiv, believe with Rajiv, we got the play on the name, we got the rhyme, but it's also who he is at his core. That's the most optimistic dude you'll ever find, right? So it works. I don't know if Justin for Justin works on the multiple levels that I'm looking for. But Greg, man, I appreciate it. I like the name play. Commandant Klink says he would give Gard a B+ this offseason. If he can get the big man back up that can hold the fort defensively when Crowell's on the bench, I would give him an A. Yeah, I mean, that would be the coup de grace, right? If you could, I think he's built most of the cake at this point. This offseason bakery of Greg Gard, it's put most of it together. If you could find that big man 5, that would be the whipped cream on top of it. And then you could go stick that in the storefront and sell that for $100, $120. So it's going to be tough, right? You have to find a big man that can come in and be okay backing up Steven Crowell, right? And that's the tricky part, but be good enough that he's not just fluff, right? He's not just filler, that he's not just flotsam. He can come out and actually give you solid minutes, but also be okay coming off the bench and not some games playing 10 minutes. You know, the Chris Vogt thing, that's what they need. A couple of people have mentioned Zach Clements. We'll bring that up here. This is from Evan Gabriel, formerly of KU, could be a starter after Crowell graduates. That's an interesting one because Clements has 2 years of eligibility left, 2 or 3. I believe it's 2. It's definitely at least 2, right? So Clements is a 6'9", 6'10 kid, former top 100 prospect, signed with Kansas. Hasn't played a lot in 2 years. He's had a lot of injuries. He hasn't played really well, but he is a former 4-star, high 4-star prospect, has nice skill, good size, and he could come this year, be a backup to this type of player, could come this year, be a backup, and then next year be a starter. So you could sell him on that. It's going to be hard to lure a senior here and say, we just need you to back up, and that's it. That's the end of your career. Clements is a guy that they could sell on, hey, come back, let's get healthy, back up Steven Crowell on a really good team, and then next year the spot is yours. A guy like that's certainly possible. That would be a big one. Bob Milborn says, I see our quarterbacks are throwing some interceptions. That is our Achilles heel. Oh, the tides of spring practice, man. It's always so difficult to talk about and analyze spring practice because, again, we talked about this when the offense was really rolling, and I was worried about the defense. By the way, I'm still worried about the defense a little bit. But now we've seen some interceptions from practice reports. Is it just a bad pass or is it a cornerback making a great play? That's always the tough spot with these. And every time you're cheering for a great defensive play, invariably, it's almost always kind of also a bad offensive play. So I love to see it. We need our secondary to be really good this year for this team to develop because I don't think the pass rush is going to be quite as dynamic as it's been in the past. But on the same token, yeah, you hate seeing our quarterbacks throwing interceptions. So, and that's something that Tanner Mordecai came in with that reputation, right? He will take some risks and he will throw some picks. He threw some at SMU. He wasn't always incredibly clean in that turnover department. So that is definitely a concern going forward. Bob, I appreciate the comment. It's just hard in practice to know for sure, right? Let's see. Michael Rippentrop. Aaron Witt is going to dominate. He's a beast with a dog's work ethic. That dude is just a mystery man, right? Like, we've been waiting for 3 years on Aaron Witt, on 2 years for Aaron Witt, and he just can't get healthy, but everybody loves him. I hope he does, just for his sake, because every time somebody talks about him, they talk about the right work ethic, the great attitude, just a grinder, and you just hope for his sake that he gets the opportunity to utilize his college career, right? To not lose it all to injury. And yeah, how much fun would it be, right, if he rises out of the depths of injury shackles in the first week of the season and is just a monster this year, and he's the guy that we've been waiting on for 2 years and talking about for 2 years. I gotta be honest. I'm kind of I need to see it at some point. I'm kind of done talking about how excited I am to see him, because I am excited to see him, but I just need to see it. And eventually, when you have so many injuries, you start to wonder if it'll ever come together. But I certainly hope so. Michael, man, I certainly hope so. This one's from Harold Lambden. Don't worry about 3-star recruits with Fickell. He built Cincy on them. Last year, Cincy had 2 All-Americans, Sauce Gardner, Dante Corleone. Those were both 3-star guys. Harold, I agree and disagree. No, I agree. Like, listen, Fickell had a reputation of building it up, but he's also going to be playing in a conference with more overall talent. So you can't just rely on building up those 3-star guys. You have to listen. Ohio State builds up talent too, but they also start with 5-star talent bases, right? So you have to up your ingredients. And, Bill Parcells always used to talk about, ingredients. I want to do the shopping, cook does the shopping, that kind of stuff. If you want to cook the best food, you need the best ingredients. And that doesn't mean it's always a 4-star player, but you can't win in the Big Ten at the highest level only recruiting 3-star guys. And Fickell's already proven he can do more than that. So I hear you. It's not all about star rankings, but you got to land some of them. This one's from Cold Stone. I'm curious, Ryan, what do you think about the narrative people have on the success of running backs in the Melvin Gordon, James White era? Do you think their success was primarily because of their athletic ability or their offensive line? The answer to that is yes to both. I mean, it's just yes to both. It's offenses have ecosystems, right? And the more fitting pieces you can put together, the better that ecosystem is going to run overall. My favorite football player of all time is Jerry Rice. I'm a Niners fan. Jerry Rice is my guy. And people will always say, well, of course, Jerry Rice has the best numbers. He played with Montana. He played with Young, Bill Walsh, the West Coast. And I will always tell them, yes, but a lot of receivers have played with great quarterbacks. A lot of receivers have played with great offensive coaches. A lot of receivers played with Jerry Rice or played with Joe Montana and Steve Young. Bill Walsh coached a lot of receivers. Only one of those guys ever put up the greatest numbers ever, and that's Jerry Rice, right? But it's also ignorant to say that it didn't help Rice. Certainly it helped having Hall of Fame quarterbacks throw to him, right? He's also a guy that at the age of 40, playing with Rich Gannon, went to the Pro Bowl, okay? So my point in that, to bring it back to the Badgers, is both, right? Melvin Gordon, James White as well, but Melvin Gordon was the freakiest of the freaks at running back. What he did, putting up 2,600 yards, is one of the all-time great running back seasons. But he was also helped by that offensive line. James White had one of the great offensive lines in recent college football history to run behind. Monty Ball, one of the great offensive lines in recent college history to run behind. So it's both. Like I have a hard time separating them, saying it's just because their athletic ability or it's just because the offensive line. I think they came together to form just this perfect storm, and they wouldn't have been as good without either. So that's where I'm at on that one. I don't know if I answered the question very well, if I took a cop out. I will say, if we're talking specifically Melvin Gordon, it was more on him because he was just so good that I think you could have put him behind any offensive line. And quite frankly, the lines he ran behind weren't as good as the James White offensive line. So I think on the Melvin Gordon scale, it probably tips to him. But for all the running backs that have had success, they've always had a dude or 2 or 3 or 4 up front that was an NFL offensive lineman, and that obviously helps. So I hope that answered the question, man. Let me know if you agree or disagree. I'm always here for the discussion. With that, let's wrap it up. On Wisconsin. Appreciate everybody. Let's talk tomorrow.